So, obviously Joel's not here today, but I texted him this morning, was like, hey, everyone wants to see your face. So can you give us a short little video update? So Kevin, you can go ahead and play that.
Good morning, everyone. I'm here in Jordan's room, and this is day 12. And basically not a lot has changed since yesterday or last night. They're still continuing to just monitor his vitals and all of that stuff. He just met with the facial surgeons and everything looks pretty good. And they may have to put the wires back on. They are waiting for him to get breathing better and all that kind of stuff. But we just so appreciate all your prayers and all your concern, and we thank you and we love you. And he's kind of resting this morning to see if I can get him on camera. He didn't really want to be on, but but thank you so much for your concern and for your prayers, and we thank you. God bless. Have a good day.
So if I haven't met you yet, my name is Jaden. I'm actually Joel's middle son, and I had the pleasure of going to see Jordan pretty quickly after his accident. And funny story, I know it's kind of weird to talk about tragedy and talk about it being funny, but when we went into the room, we were in there for about a couple minutes. I'm somebody who doesn't really like hospitals. I don't know if anybody else is like that. Just walking in, just the smell of a hospital just kind of gets me. Is that me making noise? There we go. I fix it. So anyway, if you notice, I've got a little hospital wristband on. So we walked into Jordan's room. I'm still making noise, aren't I? I'll just keep talking. We'll try to ignore that. So anyway, we walk into Jordan's hospital room. We're there for a couple minutes. And the next thing I know, I just feel like the smell of this room is just getting really overwhelming. And I knew there was a trash can behind me. And so next thing I know, I'm turning to throw up, and I wake up in a wheelchair. So I had actually fainted, and I was out for 10 minutes. And they admitted me into the ER, and I had no control of my body for at least 15 minutes. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I can hear everything. I want to talk with and tell everyone I'm fine. I just don't have control of my body right now. So I finally get admitted to the ER, and then once I can finally talk, I say I don't need to be here. And I got up and walked out, so I didn't actually have to go in. So anyway, it was a wild ride. I ended up in the hospital as Jordan was in the hospital. But we are super thankful, and we've just been really blessed by how good his recovery's gone so far. It's going to be a couple months for him, but we've been overwhelmed just with the love and prayers of not just you guys, but all of Jordan's friends, which Joe and I were surprised he had so many, to be honest. But it's been so cool. I mean, we've had a GoFundMe going, and so many people who I haven't even talked to in years have been donating, which is just amazing to us. But one thing I want to share with this whole situation that happened, the day after Jordan had his accident, when Mads and I were talking about it, she was really kind of shook up, and she was kind of confused why I seemed so unemotional about it. But the truth of it was, when I got the phone call that Jordan was in an accident and he was alive, I felt nothing but thankfulness that he was alive. I knew how bad it could have been, and really all I felt was just, wow, like I'm glad he's alive. And some people would mourn a situation like that, but I had so much trust in the Lord that he had a plan for Jordan's life, and if it was still to continue, that was his will. And so I really just felt thankful. And it kind of circled me back to something that God's really put on my heart throughout this whole summer, which is the idea of having an eternal mindset, which is what we're going to hone in on today. So Kevin, you're going to slap up the definition of mindset. I've talked about it before, I like words, I like to break down what we're talking about. So a mindset, the definition of it is the established set of attitudes held by someone. To make this sound a little bit, make more sense of it, some synonyms here would be like a perspective, a viewpoint, or an outlook. So this is kind of the way we view situations. And it's different from a worldview, because a worldview is the lens in which we see the world and how it plays into our lives. A mindset is the way we view situations and how we respond to them. And so, in our culture today, people talk about mindset a lot. You hear things like, let me sell you a winner's mindset. LeBron this season has a championship mindset. If you take my class, you'll have a mindset of success. There's a lot of mindset that we talk about, and really we should have mindsets when we're looking at things. But for me, I have a beef with things that aren't biblical. I mean, I can talk about this a little bit. So I always was like, okay, championship mindset, winner's mindset, successful mindset, that sounds really cool, but is that going to help us in the long run when it comes to loving Jesus and having a relationship with him? And so that's where the idea of an eternal mindset comes from. And Jesus talks about having an eternal mindset a lot in Scripture. So one thing that really got me fixed on this, I did an internship at a school this last year. And in every school almost that I've been to in the last 4 years, they talk about having a growth mindset. So with students, they want them to be able to picture themselves as being able to grow. So Kevin, you want to slap up that next picture? You see posters like this all over the place in schools. And I think they're awesome. This was one of my favorite things from my internship that I saw, is a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. So fixed mindset says, I can't do things because I am this. Fixed mindset gives up easily, whereas a growth mindset keeps trying. These things are awesome. I think there's a place for them, but I also think we should set ourselves with a mindset on Jesus. And so our big idea for today, if there's nothing else you remember today, remember this. Eternal mindset results from continually fixing our eyes on Jesus. We always try to make the big idea something easy to remember. If you just fix your eyes on Jesus, this is what develops an eternal mindset. And so I do have something that can kind of get our head around this. Like, what does this mean to just set our eyes on Jesus? So if you know my father, he really cares about his lawn. He loves mowing the lawn. For years, he never let me mow the lawn. He let me do it once when I was in the 4th grade, and apparently I did it wrong, because he never let me do it again. And I do remember him being very unhappy with the way I did it. And I didn't really understand it. But this summer, he kind of let up the reins a little bit. He's let me mow the lawn out here at the church. So I've been doing it for the past couple months. And I've learned a lot just through mowing the lawn. I never thought I would, but here I am. So this picture kind of shows a good lawn has good striping. If anybody's been in landscaping or if you've mowed your own lawn, you understand that if you've got lines that are all over the place, it doesn't look good. But if you've got some good striping, that looks good. And just in my first day of mowing the lawn, I learned this lesson. I was trying to just stare at my lines that I had in front of me. I was looking right in front, trying to keep my line as I go, but I kept getting real jagged. And I was really confused. Why are my lines so jagged? And then I remembered an old tale, I don't even remember where this came from, about I think it's oxen who would plow fields. And what they would do is they would set their sights directly as forward as far as they could look, and they would have straight lines. So like, if it works for oxen, I might as well try it. So the more I would set my eyes as far as they could go, I'd look at a tree in front of me, or when I'm coming towards the parking lot, I'm looking at the lines. My lines were straighter. It was amazing. It was like I had these jagged lines because I was just looking in front of me, but then once I'm looking forward, I had straight lines. And this is kind of what eternal mindset looks like. When we set our eyes ahead on eternity, we have straight lines. We're on the path that God wants us on. If we're just looking in front of us, our lines are going to be a little jagged. So let's kind of hit this point home a little bit. Let's dive into some scripture here. So we're going to be in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, if you've got your Bibles. We're going to be looking specifically at verses 1 through 17. I'll give you a second to get there. And I think it's really important when we read the Bible, we should have context of what's going on. We should know who wrote it, what's going on, what's the historical context, where is it at. And so we're going to be looking at Corinthians, which was written by the Apostle Paul. This is a letter that he wrote to the Corinthian people. And Corinth is a city, if we were to compare it to America, Corinth is kind of like Vegas a little bit. They were known for being immoral. It was kind of like if you wanted to do something, it was kind of like, let's go to Corinth. Kind of like people talk about, let's go to Vegas. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. What happened in Corinth stayed in Corinth. It was kind of how it went. This was a big city that had lots of money. It had lots of people. And it was strategically built. A lot of trade had to go right through Corinth if it wanted to get to different parts of other countries. So it was right between a mountain and there were 2 bodies of water next to it as well. So it's this city that was just a hub. There's tons of people there. And the thing was, as I mentioned earlier, they were very immoral. They were known for being immoral. And the reason for this was they had so many temples that were worshiping Greek gods at the time. And specifically one temple that's talked about is a pagan temple where they worshipped Aphrodite. And there were thousands of prostitutes outside of this temple. And what people would do is, as an act of worship, they would take prostitutes into the temple and, and that's what they would do. And those were acts of worship for them, because they worshiped the Greek gods. But Paul had planted a church there strategically, because he knew it was going to be like this. And so now there was 2 combating cultures. There's this cultural class that was immoral, and they worshipped at these pagan temples. And then there was a smaller group of people that were following Jesus. But the issue and why Paul wrote this letter was because this smaller group of people who were following Jesus started to look more like the cultural class. And so as they started to look like the culture, they started arguing with each other more. They started getting into it. They started agreeing on less. And this letter is really to confront that issue. And Paul was really genius in the way he did it. He confronted, but he did it lovingly, which is an example that we can take for ourselves here. And so to set this up, since we're in chapter 3, chapter 1, Paul talks about nothing but Jesus. He actually mentions his name at least 17 times. I counted like twice, but I'm still not positive that I had it right, because I'm just bad when it comes to keeping score or counting. So I think it's 17 times. So around there. And so Paul understands that the only thing that's going to cause real change is a fresh mindset. And that mindset is Jesus. And he understands too that heart change always takes place before behavior change. So instead of coming in and saying, you're doing this wrong, we need to be doing things this way, he came in and said, nope, let me share the gospel with you. And that's where we're going to start. So starting in verse 1 right here, let's dive in. I actually took my dad's preaching Bible because I don't have one that has the big letters in it. So I'm really excited about this. So this is a new international version. I put up the NLT on the screens because I have a couple things that are different here that I want to talk about. So verses 1 through 4, it says, brothers and sisters, I could not address you as people who live by the Spirit, but as people who are still worldly, mere infants in Christ. I gave you milk, not solid food, for you were not ready for it. Indeed, you are still not ready. You are still worldly. For since there is jealousy and quarreling among you, are you not worldly? Are you not acting like mere humans? For when one says, I follow Paul, and another, I follow Apollos, are you not mere human beings? And so what he's addressing here is our first point, which is we're prone to desire humans to look to. And this is kind of illustrated today because we really like heroes, is one thing that we look at. Marvel's Endgame, so any Avengers fans? I'm sure everyone's got to like at least one of them. Endgame just set the record as the highest grossing movie ever at $2.793 billion. And there's a reason why we like heroes. We desire humans to look to. These are people with human characteristics that do supernatural things. And so if we're looking at biblical times, what they were doing here when they're arguing between I follow Paul and I follow Apollos, that's like me when I argue and tell someone that Spider-Man's better than Iron Man. And, which we do all the time. This was how normal it was in Corinth, was they were just debating about which leader they wanted to follow and which one was better. And so Paul is saying here, all right, you guys are still immature, clearly. We need to have a talk, is basically how he's addressing them here. And he mentions that a mark of maturity for those who are following Christ is desiring God's will rather than their own will. And this kind of gets to a point here, which I think is important. A toxic Christian culture characteristic that happens today, but also happened here, is loving and following leaders who just meet our needs the most. So we have so many celebrity pastors today, whether it's Stephen Furtick or Tim Keller, John Piper, and people quote these pastors a lot. They say good things. But if we're just following a pastor, and we're just talking, or just a leader, a political figure, whatever, we can get kind of numb to the fact that we're looking to seek out our opinions and our will rather than God's will here. So then it's like, okay, so then we're not supposed to follow leaders, what do we do? And I'll address that. So rather than thinking, should we not follow leaders or should we just follow Jesus, we can look to something else Paul said. In Philippians 3:17, he said, brothers, join in imitating me and keep your eyes on those who walk according to the example you have in us. So Paul's never saying don't follow leaders. He's saying don't idolize leaders. We're supposed to imitate. We're supposed to be looking at people who are following Jesus and do the things they do. As John Piper says, I'm going to quote a pastor here. He says, it's unbiblical to say I don't need anybody to follow because I've got Jesus. We cannot say I don't need to look at Paul. I don't need to look at imitators of Paul. I don't need to look at Philippians. I don't need any pastors I have. I just need to look at Jesus. That is totally unbiblical. And that's where he gets that, is straight out of Philippians. It does say we do need to look to leaders. But what Paul's addressing in Corinthians 3 here is this obsession over leaders and this arguing over which leader over which leader. So let's dive back in. Verse 5 through 9. So what, after all, is Apollos, and what is Paul? Only servants through whom you came to believe, as the Lord has assigned each task. I planted the seed, Apollo watered it, but God has been making it grow. So neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only God who makes things grow. The one who plants and the one who waters have one purpose, and they will each be rewarded according to their own labor. For we are co-workers in God's service. You are God's field, God's building. So our second point here, it's not about the leaders, it's about our relationship with Jesus. And so what he's addressing, and we're going to end the Marvel argument here. Spider-Man or Iron Man, the fact is they're teammates. They do the same thing. They're both Avengers. They're both fighting the same battle. It's the same thing here. Paul and Apollos are both on the same team, searching for the same thing. And the one difference in these scriptures, which is up on here, it says, but God is important because he is the one who makes seeds grow. And really, sometimes we have to remember that in the grand scheme of things, we're not that important. When it comes to heart change, God's the only one that can make that happen. We're laborers and we're servants that help people get to that point. But really, it's God who sows those seeds. So Paul's telling us here that we really need not focus on leaders, but Jesus. And one thing I want to address here, when it comes to when we follow celebrities and follow leaders, something we can get stuck in is when we look at their quotes and we listen to sermons all the time. If we're not actually in our Bible, we can get into this scary situation where we're not hearing from God. I hear this all the time in college ministry, and it probably happens everywhere else too, where people say, I just feel like I haven't been hearing from the Lord. And my response is probably a little rude to that, but I just ask, did you look at this at all? This is God's word right here. If we're just listening to leaders all the time, we're not going to hear from God. Because really to hear from God is to look at his word. This is the living, breathing word that speaks to us. So I'm also a critic of motivational quotes. Again, I'm not a big fan. I don't need motivation. I just need God's will in my life. And that's what comes from the Bible. So the question here is, does your life revolve around Jesus? Or does it revolve around other things? Are we just looking for our will here? Do I want a job really bad, so am I just listening to podcasts that talk about how I can achieve in business? Or am I just going to a church because people love me and they just serve me? Really, the question to ask here, does your life revolve around Jesus? So diving back into verse 10 and 11. By the grace God has given me, I laid a foundation as a wise builder, and someone else is building on it. But each one should build with care, for no one can lay any foundation other than the one already laid, which is Jesus Christ. And so for the Corinthian people, this foundation of the church was already laid. Paul planted this church as Jesus Christ. That's the foundation that's laid. So he's telling the church that the foundation's already been laid. It's your time to do the building. So Paul's really pressing into the Corinthian people, and he's challenging the leaders to have sound teaching and to build their church on something good and godly. And so the question for us here, I feel like all biblical scripture can apply to our lives somehow. The question for us on this one is, are we building our lives on God's word? So going back in verse 12 here. If anyone builds on this foundation using gold, silver, costly stones, wood, hay, or straw, their work will be shown for what it is, because the day will bring it to light. It will be revealed with fire, and the fire will test the quality of each person's work. If what has been built survives, the builder will receive a reward. If it is burned up, the builder will suffer loss, but yet will be saved, even though only as one escaping through the flames. So something to break down here. The two different translations in the NIV, it says that they talk about the day, whereas here it talks about the judgment day. In Corinth, they were a building city. They had really cool infrastructure. They had a lot of temples. They had a lot of marketplaces and a lot of buildings. And so one thing back in Corinth, they always had inspection days. And it was referred to as the day, is what they talked about. And so this really struck a chord with Corinthian people because they understood that a day was going to come where their buildings had to be looked at. And if they weren't up to code, if they weren't what they needed to be, they tore them down. So they knew if the quality of their work was not good, they were just going to tear it down. So when it comes to looking at this, he's referring to The judgment day, the time that says there's going to be an end, is what he's telling us here. Just as in Corinth, building buildings, there was going to be an end, an inspection day. With our spiritual lives also, there's going to be a judgment day. There's going to be a day where God looks at the quality of our building. And so here, I've got to be really careful not to sound works-based. This does not mean we need to go on every mission trip we can. This doesn't mean we have to serve the church every single day. Really, God's looking at our heart and our quality of wanting to build a relationship with him. And really, the more we build that relationship with him, the more we will desire to do things such as serving the church and serving others. And so some of the materials Paul's talking about here, when he talks about building with gold, silver, jewels, we obviously know that gold's going to last a lot longer in a fire than hay is. So when we look at our spiritual lives, he's really talking about doctrine and the way that we live. So if our doctrine is not correct, it's as if it was hay, where it's going to burn up. But if we live with correct doctrine and we're built on God's word, that's gold. That's what God wants us to build our lives on. And so, as you can probably assume here, Paul's addressing a lot of people who are involved in the building business. And in the same way, we're also in the business of building our spiritual lives. So, the Corinthian people, yes, they've laid the foundation. He's telling them now it's time to build. We haven't done it yet, it's time. And really, when Paul's talking about setting our sights on the judgment day, he's talking about setting our sights on eternity. He's saying it's time for us to have an eternal mindset. It's time for us to look ahead and understand that if we keep looking right forward at our own needs, we're going to have the jagged path and not the straight lines. So really, that's the punchline. We're looking at eternal mindset here, and this is what he's speaking into the Corinthian people. Let's go back into verses 16 through 18. So don't you know that you yourselves are God's temple, and that God's Spirit dwells in your midst? If anyone destroys God's temple, God will destroy that person. For God's temple is sacred, and you together are that temple. You do not deceive yourselves. If any of you think you are wise by the standards of this age, you should become fools, so that you may become wise. So the point here, eternal mindset, creates us wise with God's standards. So to the Corinthians here, he's calling out their arguing. He's saying arguing with one another is going to tear down the temple. If we're debating about whose teaching is better, whether it's Paul or Apollos, we're not getting anywhere. But if we can be of one mind here and understand that this teaching is good, and we can agree on something, we can start to build. So when we continue to keep our eyes on Jesus, the wisdom of the world almost becomes void. So I've seen this in my own life. So this past year, I went through a pretty tough internship. So me and my supervisor didn't have the best of relationships, so I really struggled through this time. And granted, I did cling to Jesus, but not at first. So at first, I was like, okay, I can get through this. I just need to make sure that I'm taking care of myself. I really bought into the idea of self-care. It's like, if I just do the things that I know I need to do, if I can get the sleep I need, eat the food that I need to eat, I can get through this even though I do not like it. And so over time, I just kept becoming more and more upset with this, and it just was not filling me up. I wasn't in the Word as much, and I was just really buying into the wisdom of the world, which tells us, hey, if we take care of our bodies, we take care of our mind, and we take our self-care, we're going to feel okay. But it really wasn't until I started really diving into God's Word about what it looked like to be dealing with struggles of the mind that I started to feel at least a little freedom in this. So the question here is, how often are we viewing situations with an eternal mindset? So for me, I was viewing my situation day by day. I was like, if I can just get through today, I'm going to look here. I'm not looking at eternity. And I really struggled day in and day out to really feel like I was making any impact or feeling like I was going anywhere. But as I shifted my perspective and started to look towards Jesus, I realized that a lot of what I was doing in the grand scheme of things was not as important. Therefore, it didn't hold as much of an emotional pull on my life. And so back to the lawn example here, when I was looking right in front of me, my lines were real jagged and my lawn didn't look very good. But once I set my sights on heaven and looked at an eternal mindset, I started to feel filled. My path had become more straight. And so that's really our theme today with the Corinthian people. Paul was telling them, let's start to build, let's set our sights on heaven, and let's start to do something with our lives. And now that's great. It's like, okay, but where does Jesus talk about this? That's always the question I ask is, okay, that's great. Now what about Jesus? Kevin, you want to put this up? So Jesus actually discusses eternity a lot. And I'm sure we know that. But here's a ton of examples of where Jesus is discussing eternity. And surprisingly, he actually talks about hell more than he talks about heaven. But just some of the examples here, Jesus teaching about giving to the needy. Jesus teaches about money. Jesus teaches about worry. Narrow is the gate to heaven. He describes hell as the unquenchable fire. There's the parable of the weeds, parable of the hidden treasure. All of these have to do with eternity. Jesus spent most of the Gospels trying to set our sights on heaven, trying to point us to eternity, letting us know that there's more going on. And another verse I really like to head here, or to kind of wrap things up here with Colossians is Colossians 3:1, It says, since you have been raised to new life with Christ, set your sights on the realities of heaven, where Christ sits at God's right hand, in the place of honor and power. So we're called to set our sights on heaven, having an eternal mindset, looking towards Jesus in all of our situations. And coming back to the situation with my brother, I think if that would have happened a year ago, I probably would have been panicking and freaking out just because he got hurt. But as I look towards Jesus immediately, I realize that he's alive. I have nothing but thankfulness to feel right now. And so if you're new to church at all, if this is your first time even being in church, I'm glad you're here. My challenge to you would be think about what you're building your life on and what foundation you have in your life. If you're a newer Christian, someone who just started following Jesus, I want you to remember what Christ has done for you and continue to saturate yourself in the Word of God. Whether it's reading through the Gospels, all the examples of when Jesus set our sights on eternity, or if it's reading about Paul's teachings, whatever. Saturating yourselves in the Gospel. And if you've been a Christian for a long time, if you've been doing this, you've been through the battles, you're like, I know exactly what you're talking about. This makes sense to me. I just want you to reflect. Do you relate to anything the Corinthians are experiencing here? Is there any quarreling going on or arguing about what leaders are better? Do you operate with an eternal mindset, or have you been brought into the world's wisdom? Is kind of what we're looking at. So if any of this strikes a chord with you, I would encourage you just to talk with somebody about it. Really diving into God's Word is great, and then talking with others about it really helps it set into our hearts. So this has been something that's been put on my heart for the last summer, and something that's really shifted my mind a lot. And I hope it does with you as well. There's so much to be said about eternity and just looking at Jesus. And really at the end of the day, Jesus died for us on the cross, and he rose again to save us from our sins. And he wanted to invite us into a relationship. And that's what we should do because we have the freedom to do it. As I pray, the band's going to come back up, and we're going to end today. Me and Madison are heading back to see Jordan today. We also want to pray for the Reasoner family too. Courtney's progressing from what I know. And obviously we want to pray for El Paso and Dayton as well. There's a lot going on, but if we keep our sights set on heaven, if we have our eternal mindset, God's always good. Let's pray. Dear Jesus, we just thank you for this day and just this time to just dive into your word and reflect on it. We thank you for the ability to have an eternal mindset and just to look to you and all of the words that you've given us. Lord, I just pray that if we strike a chord with the Corinthian people at all, if we see ourselves being a little immature or seeking the wisdom of the world, just that we would press into that and just seek you and just seek your word and seek your truths through that, Lord. I just pray that we would just look to eternity in all that we do. And I pray that we would connect with others and just continue to do the mission that you've called us on and to continue to build on the foundation that you've already laid for us. Lord, I pray for everyone here, whether they are new to the faith or whether they've been in it for the long run. I just pray that we would just continue to just run the race, Lord. In your name we pray. Amen.